Hello, everybody. My name is Erika. I'm with Dogwise, and I'm joined today by Dr. Kristina Spaulding, the author
Hello.
of Stress Factor in Dogs. But today we're going to be talking about a different book. So, Kristina, I saw you at a conference last year, and you recommended this book, and you said Dogwise should definitely carry this book. So, what book is it that you recommend that we carry, and why do you recommend this book to everybody?
So it's called The Nature of Emotion, Fundamental Questions. And this is very much an academic textbook, but I think there's a lot of information in here that is really valuable for anyone that works for animals, including dogs. And what I love about it is it's a long book, it's 420 pages. I mean, it's big, right? Like, thick, big book, but I think one of the things that makes it so much less intimidating is because it's divided into chapters, and each of those chapters is multiple essays. And so you can really go in there and pick exactly what you want to read about and read about topics of interest to you in small bite-sized bits. So instead of just having chapter one, chapter two, chapter three, they divide it up by questions. So chapter one is question one: what is an emotion? And then there are essays from different researchers in the field, and they basically contacted kind of the top researchers in the field or the people who they thought were most qualified to answer these questions. And then they invited them to submit essays. So these are all really big names. Some of these names are big enough that probably people will recognize them. And then other names are big in science, but you might not recognize them outside of that. But so question one is, what is an emotion? There's also how are emotions, mood, and temperament related? Uh, what are the dimensions and bases for lasting individual differences in emotion? How are emotions organized in the brain? And I'm only like, I mean, that was question five, and there's 15, 14 questions. How are emotions physically embodied? That's question number 11. Um, what is the role of conscious awareness in emotion? How are emotions integrated into choice? That's a very exciting one to me. And then within each of those, again, you have multiple essays. So for like under what is an emotion, there's an essay on emotions and feelings. What is emotion in natural science perspective? And the other thing that they do that I really, really like is at the end of each chapter, the editors of the book write a synopsis. So they basically take all the essays and they kind of summarize them in a final essay and talk about um, kind of what we know now and maybe what we might be looking at going forward. And so if you want a way, like if you're wanting to understand emotion and it's way too intimidating, and it is, I mean, it's basically impossible, it's practically impossible to wade into the scientific literature because it's so dense and there's so much of it. But this is a really nice way to kind of get some of the most up-to-date thoughts from the biggest names in science in little easily digestible pieces.
I think it's so interesting hearing about like where emotion is in the brain, but also where it is in the body. And you were talking about the natural history of emotion. And tell
Yeah.
me something about choice, something about how we make choices and emotions. What is
Yeah,
that?
so question 13 is how are emotions integrated into choice? And so like the first essay in that is how can affect influence choice? And affect is just a scientific mood for emotion and mood. And so that's super fascinating and interesting, right? Um, and emotion value in choice, from emotion to motion, making choices based on current states and biological needs. So those are just some of the ones. And I will like not I don't think every single one of these essays is going to apply to dogs, but a lot of them do. Um, and so I like those. There's also um, there's an essay on reactivity, recovery, and regulation, the three R's of emotional responding, which I really like, and I've incorporated that one into my course. Um, the questions about what an emotion is, that's chapter one. I think those are really interesting. I mean, there's tons of them, but Yeah, another question 7, how are emotions regulated by context and cognition? Um, and all kinds of like emotion regulation as a change of goals and priorities is one of the essays under that.
Ooh, interesting. That's
Yeah.
something I maybe wouldn't have thought of. I think what
Yes.
sounds really fascinating about this book is that it's answering questions I wouldn't even think to ask, which means I
Yeah.
learn things that I didn't even think I didn't know. So, what a fascinating
Right.
topic. As far as this book for dog trainers, or even just people who work with dogs, people who are canine professionals, or people who just live with dogs, is this a book that you would recommend to everybody? Is it something that specific people would benefit from more, or is it people who just really want to geek out and dive deep into the science of emotion?
I would definitely say it's for people who really are into the science because it is science. And some of the essays I would say are really accessible, and some of them are a lot harder to get through. There's plenty that are pretty accessible. Um, but probably the audience that's going to be most helpful to are behaviorists, well, or
Okay.
behavior consultants. I would say, although I think, for training, I think if you're doing training and you're not necessarily working behavior cases, but you're really interested in getting deep into the science of like different motivations that might impact training, like if you want to get into the nitty-gritty science of that, there'd be plenty here for you too. But probably the best match is going to be behavior consultants, and then maybe dog owners if they have a deep interest in science. I would say most dog owners is way too much for, just because they probably don't want that much detail. But if someone really loves science or they really love behavior, then I mean, I would recommend it for them too.
Fantastic. And can you just show us how big the book is?
Yeah. I know it's probably backwards on your screen, but
No, it's great. It looks great.
yeah.
So it is a big book, but it's a deep dive into science. It's really going to give you a lot of understanding about how emotions work and where they work and how they're affecting our behavior. And I think I can see that being easily applied to my life and the life that I share with my dogs. So I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much for your recommendation of this book. If anyone is interested in purchasing this book or Kristina's book, The Stress Factor in Dogs, we encourage you to visit dogwise.com. Thanks for joining us today, Kristina.
Thanks, Erica.